Winter, 1834. A doctor forced open the doors of a silent convent in rural Ohio. Inside, he found 14 nuns, all of them dead. No wounds, no struggle, just peaceful faces and a single word written beside each body: complete. What happened inside the Sacred Heart Convent that winter was so disturbing, the church tried to erase it from history. Dr. Samuel Hartwell spent the rest of that terrible winter haunted by the silence of Sacred Heart. Even after leaving the convent behind him, the doctor could not escape the memory of those frozen halls, the rows of peaceful faces, or the final whisper of Sister Mary Agnes collapsing in his arms. For weeks he slept little. When he did sleep, the dreams always returned. He would find himself standing again in the chapel of Sacred Heart, candlelight flickering across empty pews. And from the shadows he would hear voices, soft, patient, waiting, calling. Publicly, the tragedy of Sacred Heart was quickly buried. The official county record stated simply, 14 women of the Sacred Heart Convent died during the winter of 1834 from causes believed to be related to a sudden illness exacerbated by severe weather conditions. The Catholic Church, deeply embarrassed by the event and fearful of anti-Catholic hostility in the region, moved quickly. The building was sealed, the property was abandoned, and the story quietly disappeared. But privately, Dr. Hartwell continued his investigation. He became obsessed with understanding how 14 intelligent, devout women could calmly and willingly surrender their lives. And the more he studied the letters of Marcus Aldrich, the more horrifying the truth became. Marcus Aldrich had once been considered a brilliant theological student. Born in New Haven, Connecticut, Aldrich had attended seminary with exceptional promise. Professors described him as intellectually gifted, deeply spiritual, and frighteningly persuasive. But there had always been something unsettling about him. His writings revealed an obsession with death, not as an end, but as a transformation. Aldrich believed that human beings clung too tightly to life. To him, death was simply a doorway, and he believed that with the proper psychological preparation, entire communities could be guided willingly through that doorway, not through violence, not through coercion, but through belief. The letters Hartwell decoded revealed Aldrich's strategy in disturbing detail. His method followed several precise stages. 1. Isolation. Aldrich specifically targeted communities already separated from society: convents, monasteries, remote missions, places where outside influence was limited, places where authority structures were absolute, and where members trusted one another completely. Sacred Heart Convent had been the perfect environment: snowbound, remote, dependent entirely on their spiritual leadership. 2. Authority. Aldrich never manipulated entire communities directly. Instead, he targeted one person, the leader. Once he convinced the leader, the rest of the community would follow naturally. At Sacred Heart, that leader had been Mother Superior Catherine Brennan. His letters to her were masterful examples of psychological manipulation. He praised her devotion, he praised her discipline, and gradually he introduced the idea that her convent had been chosen for something extraordinary. 3. Conditioning. The letters described a gradual shift in spiritual focus, meditations on death, discussions of eternal joy, reflections on the idea that the body was merely a temporary prison for the soul. At first, the changes seemed harmless. Then they became central to daily prayer. Eventually, the sisters began to speak of death not as tragedy, but as reward, exactly as Sister Mary Agnes had recorded in her journal. 4. The first death.
Aldrich believed the first death was the most important. Once one person crossed the threshold peacefully, the others would follow more easily. The dead became proof that death was not frightening, proof that it was beautiful, and the living began to envy the departed, exactly as Sister Mary Agnes had written.
Aldrich's letters described the final stage as completion. The deaths would occur gradually until only one member remained. The final survivor would experience overwhelming emotional and spiritual pressure, grief, isolation, the belief that all her companions had already reached paradise, and eventually she too would willingly follow. The circle would close, the experiment would be complete. At Sacred Heart, Sister Mary Agnes had been the final subject. As Dr. Hartwell expanded his research, he discovered that Sacred Heart was not unique. Over the next decade, he quietly documented similar incidents across the country, each one eerily similar, each one involving isolated religious communities, each one involving unexplained deaths marked by peaceful expressions and notes referencing divine calling. Virginia, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, different denominations, different leaders, but always the same pattern, and always, somewhere in the background, correspondence signed by the Shepherd. Despite Hartwell's growing evidence, Marcus Aldrich was never captured. By the time authorities attempted to track him, he had already disappeared. No confirmed records place him anywhere after 1835. Some believed he fled west. Others believed he changed identities and continued his work quietly. A few investigators feared something worse, that Aldrich had followers, students, people who believed in his philosophy of spiritual engineering, people who might still be continuing his work. Dr. Hartwell never spoke publicly about Sacred Heart again, but privately he never stopped studying the case. His journals, discovered after his death in 1867, contained hundreds of pages documenting his investigation into Aldrich's network. In his final entry, written only weeks before his death, Hartwell wrote something deeply unsettling. What frightens me most is not that Aldrich existed, it is that his methods worked so easily. Faith is powerful, but in the wrong hands, faith becomes a weapon more dangerous than any poison. For nearly 90 years, Sacred Heart Convent remained abandoned. Weather slowly destroyed the building, the roof collapsed, windows shattered, nature reclaimed the land. In 1923, a group of workers arrived to renovate the property into a farm estate. During construction, they discovered a wooden box hidden beneath the chapel floor. Inside were the journals of Sister Mary Agnes. Her trembling handwriting documented the final days of the convent in chilling detail. Every death, every conversation, every growing sense that something terrible was happening. But the most disturbing page was the final one, written only hours before her death. The final entry read, "They say I will join them soon. They say the door is almost open, but tonight I hear something else. Another voice, a voice beyond theirs, watching, waiting, guiding." The page ended there. No signature, no final sentence, just a smear of ink across the paper, as if the pen had fallen from her hand. Today, the Sacred Heart Cemetery still exists. It sits quietly in the woods outside the town of Millbrook, Ohio. 14 iron crosses stand in a single row, each bearing the name of one of the sisters who died during that terrible winter. Visitors sometimes report strange things, cold spots, whispers carried on the wind, a feeling of being watched.
But the most unsettling detail appears on the final cross, the one belonging to Sister Mary Agnes. Unlike the others, it bears a small engraving beneath her name. No one knows when it was added or who carved it, but the words remain clearly visible to this day. One word, the same word found in the hands of the final 12 sisters: complete. Historians today generally accept Dr. Hartwell's explanation: psychological manipulation, isolation, religious conditioning, a tragic example of how easily belief can be twisted. But some researchers still question one detail that does not fit the pattern. According to Hartwell's journal, Aldrich planned to visit Sacred Heart in the spring of 1834 to witness the completion of his experiment, but the doctor never found any record that Aldrich ever arrived, which leaves a disturbing possibility. If Aldrich was not there, then who or what answered the sisters' final prayer?